Hi friends, it's Caleb here. Welcome back to my channel and to another video. A couple of weeks ago, I asked pretty much everybody that I know or that knows that I'm trans to please send me a couple of questions about things that they've always wanted to ask a trans person, particularly in relation to the experience of a closeted trans man, which is what I am. I'm out to most of my inner circle online and in real life, except for some members of my family, but I am not out to many of my colleagues, co-workers, and most of the world, and for that reason I am not fully masculine presenting. So let's just jump right into it. Number one, when did you first realize that you were trans? This one is a bit of a long story, and for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to try to condense it. When I was still dating a guy back in 2013 to 2014, I still identified completely as female. I was not very knowledgeable about the LGBTQ community or anything, although I did have my first inklings that I might be bisexual. So there's that. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was that the first time that he called me a woman and a girl, it sent a very, very deeply uncomfortable feeling through me. And it was not something that I could explain. And let me give you some context. Growing up in an Asian family that speaks a different language at home, being called a woman or a girl was something that I got called pretty much 0% of the time. Even my own name, my dead name, which is very femme-sounding, was not something that was used at all by members of my family. That was a very novel experience to me, and I kept grappling with that, and until I finally realized that I was probably, at the very least, some kind of non-binary, non-gender conforming kind of identity, and that kind of internal struggle, self-discovery continued for several years. The year that I actually really came to terms with the fact that I was trans would have to be late 2017, early 2018 actually, early 2018. I was already dating my current fiancé. They're amazing. See that ring? And yeah, so I had been talking a lot about being non-binary, but also a lot more about body dysphoria, and so that's how I realized that I was trans after researching a lot. Okay, so question number 2 from another friend. Seeing as I'm playing an FTM trans guy, I know this is probably a little difficult to answer, but I just want to understand better. Like what dysphoria is like, what it feels like when your voice feels too high, for example, or you wear femme clothes and things like that, and vice versa, what makes it good to wear masculine clothes and have a low voice. Let me just preface this by saying that I will not jump into talking about gender binaries, like what really is gendered clothing, what really is a gendered way of presenting yourself. Like briefly, if we were to try to conceptualize gender as kind of a spectrum and as a better model instead of the binary, you would have like female, the ones who definitely call themselves non-binary, and then male or femme and masculine. How one identifies as a gender, how they feel that their gender definitely is, can align with or may not align with how they present based on their own circumstances, etc. I will try to link a couple of good resources that are much more articulate about this topic, so that I can answer the question more concisely. So basically with my dysphoria, I have a lot of issues about the size of my chest, my voice particularly sounding too high to my own ears, things like that. And dysphoria is basically when you look at yourself in the mirror, or you see your body parts, or you're very aware of the weight and the appearance of your body parts, and it fills you with a sense of being very uncomfortable. It varies for different people. Some people it's not as conscious, but they feel more comfortable presenting as another gender. Other gender, I hesitate to use words like other and another, but you get what I mean. And that would be their brand of dysphoria. For me, it's a bit more severe, wherein I struggle with thoughts of self-harm, for example, on the bad days, wanting to, sort of rip off the offending body parts that make me appear very femme on the outside. On very bad days as well, I am sometimes selectively mute or even mute the entire day just because hearing my own voice and how femme the register is to my own ears is so emotionally and psychologically painful that I would rather not speak. On the flip side, there's something that is sometimes jokingly, sometimes seriously referred to as gender euphoria, as in that time when you're wearing something or presenting something that is aligned with the gender that you identify as, and it really fills you with a sense of self-confidence, that this is who you are, and you're comfortable in your own skin. So when I'm wearing pants, nice button down, my binder, which I don't have on today, my chest binder, even a necktie or whatever, I have my hair out of my face, or even being referred to as my chosen name, which is Caleb, my pronouns, he, him, that gives me gender euphoria, which is the complete opposite, and it feels really, really great. Question number 3. Now that you know that you're trans, was your dysphoria present all throughout your life, or did it increase with puberty and all that? Oh, that's a good question, because I think the most common transgender narrative, especially through the popularization of FTM or MTF transition timelines on YouTube, not that there's no value in that, those are really amazing to watch and very inspiring, but that is the most popularized narrative of the transgender transitioning experience, I think. And I would say from the many videos that I've watched of that style, a very common theme is the idea of never feeling like they belonged in their body since they were a young kid. Obviously there are exceptions. And I think sometimes that is an unintentionally damaging concept to making people attain a more holistic, a more inclusive idea of what it really is to be transgender, because there are actually some people who don't even realize that they have dysphoria or don't have dysphoria up until they actually have puberty, or up until something that they encounter, someone that they speak to, triggers some kind of understanding in them later on in adulthood. And that's kind of like what happened with me. I definitely did not have any kind of dysphoria when I was a young child, pre-puberty. Looking back at my photos, I can tell that I was happiest when I was wearing what you would consider tomboyish clothes. I'll put a couple of examples right up here, like the loose-fitting jeans, the vest, the button-downs, those clunky shoes and all that. I would say my dysphoria was present after puberty. I have always been very consciously uncomfortable with the size of my chest, but I used to consider it a kind of discontent with the physical back pain that it would give me, or the fact that it was so difficult to find clothing that didn't have to be altered in some way because of the size of my chest. But then later on, when I realized that even when I was wearing like minimizing bras and now more recently chest binders, even though I feel better with a chest binder that makes me practically flat, I still experience that dysphoria about knowing that I do have feminine looking breasts. Next question. So what things do and do not give you dysphoria compared with other trans guys? Oh, that's a good one. I was talking to a friend the other day about how a lot of trans guys feel dysphoric about their height, because the average biological female is obviously shorter across the board than the average biological male. And one physical trait that is tied very closely with traditional masculinity is height, in addition to muscle, broad shoulders, etc. But for me, surprisingly and thankfully, I don't really feel dysphoric about my height, even though I'm just around 5 foot tall. One thing that might explain that is that coming from an Asian culture, I have met many biological males who are Asians who are pretty much my height. This is kind of average for where my parents come from. I do feel extremely dysphoric about my hands. I have a big thumb, but short fingers. And one thing that I've always wished that I had were like veins, corded hands and long fingers. I did already talk about this at length, and I even had a video dedicated to it. I get a lot of dysphoria from my voice. My jawline. I do wish I had a sharper jawline. I have begun to adopt a kind of like a masculinizing kind of contouring style, which is not present today. But instead of the traditionally feminine contouring style, which tends to narrow the face and soften edges here and trim the jaw like this, masculinizing contouring would be a little sharper, and this entire squarish part of the jawline would not be minimized, and then like right under here to minimize the soft chin area. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to having if and when I do medically transition and get on testosterone. Next question. Do you try to change your body language or gestures, etc., in order to be more masculine even while you're still feminine presenting? And if so, how do you go about that? That's a good question, because I had a classmate from this campus who I speak to in real life, who said that after I came out to them as trans, they said, oh, they could actually kind of see it in my mannerisms. And that was very interesting and encouraging. In terms of masculinizing gestures, again, without entering into the conversation about binaries and what should be a feminine gesture versus a masculine gesture, I would say, I think from my observation, that more feminine registering gestures would have to do with like straighter fingers, for example, when you're trying to explain something, whereas masculine would be like a loose claw. You know what I mean? Like, see, when I'm kind of explaining something, it's not like this. This is like an exaggerated motion, but like that. Things like spreading myself out a little more over the space that I take up, especially in a public area. Definitely man-spreading whenever I can, whenever I'm wearing pants. It really, really helps with my dysphoria to like man-spread. Other things are that traditionally femme ways of speaking are a little bit more enunciative, I would say. I was born and raised in New York, so I'm not the prime example to talk about this because New Yorkers slur their words. But I definitely slurred my words a little bit more, whether consciously or subconsciously, after I realized I was trans and really wanted to present a little more masculine or tomboyish in as much as possible. Question, this one came from several people, so I have to answer it. Why do you still wear makeup so prominently? It basically has to do with the fact that I'm still closeted, and the family member that I live with is pretty big about presenting properly, so it's just to like keep harmony. I wear makeup. I also believe that biological guys should be able to wear makeup too, even if it's just like concealer or whatever, like concealatory kind of makeup or bold makeup. But now I kind of use it to try to masculinize my bone structure, as I've talked about before. Okay, next question. What is your brand of masculine fashion? For example, personally, I have a passion for old, oversized shirts, so I know who that one came from. Yeah, I think I basically talked about it. I'm pretty formal or business casual whenever I go anywhere, so I really like button-downs, slacks, like pointed square toe shoes. I haven't really worked out what my summer masculine style is. Summer is pretty difficult for many trans guys because it's really hot, but you have to wear your chest binder, and a lot of body parts are on display that are femme. What is it like being misgendered and, of course, being closeted, not being able to correct the person who misgenders you? It can be difficult, but it's not the end of the world to me when I get misgendered, because obviously I know how femme I still present, despite my voice, despite my gestures, etc. So I guess it doesn't really bother me. The only thing that really bothers me is if I've already come out to somebody and they would willfully use she, her, and or my dead name when I've specifically asked them not to. This doesn't really happen because I have very respectful friends, and I also allow for the fact that it can be very difficult to adjust to the fact that this femme-presenting friend of mine identifies as he, him, and also trying to understand, like, okay, if we're in a public space, does he want me to say he, him, or should I, like, keep them closeted? So that doesn't count. But I had a teacher